Sometimes life puts you in situations you never see coming. For me, it started like any other day at the repair shop. A few cars to fix, nothing out of the ordinary. I had no idea that by the end of it, I'd be staring down a life or death moment, one that would test every ounce of courage and skill I didn't even know I had. What happened next didn't just change one family's life, it changed mine forever. This is my story. Growing up in my neighborhood, you learn early that life doesn't hand you much. The cracked sidewalks, secondhand school supplies, and constant hum of traffic outside our small apartment weren't just part of the scenery. They were a reminder. A reminder that if I wanted something, I had to work for it. But I wasn't one to complain. Even as a kid, I loved figuring things out, taking apart broken radios or tinkering with old gadgets just to see how they worked. Teachers would call me a natural problem solver, saying I had the potential to do great things. But life doesn't always wait for potential. When my dad fell ill, everything shifted. He'd been the strongest person I knew, always working hard to keep our family afloat. Seeing him stuck in bed, drained by a sickness we couldn't afford to treat properly, was a blow. My mom did everything she could, working extra shifts at her cleaning job, but it was never enough. I knew what I had to do. One night at the kitchen table, as my mom stared at a pile of unpaid bills, I told her, "Don't worry, Ma. I'll take care of it. I'll find work." She protested, of course. Her eyes filled with tears, but I had already made up my mind. How could I sit in a classroom knowing my family was struggling? I found a job at a local auto repair shop, run by Mr. Harris, a no-nonsense mechanic who quickly became a mentor. At first, I didn't know much about cars, but it turns out fixing things came naturally to me. Within weeks, I was diagnosing problems and repairing engines with a speed and precision that even surprised the seasoned workers. "Kid, you've got a gift," Mr. Harris told me one afternoon as I replaced a timing belt. I smiled, but inside, I couldn't stop thinking about my family. No matter how good I was at fixing cars, the weight of their struggles never left my mind. But I didn't just work hard. I cared. I treated every customer with respect, whether it was the parents trying to get their minivan back on the road or the elderly neighbor who could barely afford the repairs. If it meant staying late or improvising a solution, I'd do it. Before the repair shop, I'd worked as a janitor at a maternity clinic. That job wasn't glamorous, but I took pride in doing it well. The nurses at the clinic saw something in me, often letting me help out with small tasks. "You've got good instincts, Abdul," Nurse Carla once told me. "Ever think about becoming a doctor?" I laughed at the idea. "Maybe in another life," I said. But I loved learning from them. How to stay calm in emergencies, how to recognize the signs of labor, even some basic first aid. Little did I know, those lessons would one day mean everything. It started as a regular evening at the shop. I was finishing up work on an old sedan, the air thick with the smell of motor oil. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the garage, when I heard a car sputtering into the lot. I looked up to see a small sedan barely making it to a stop, smoke curling from under the hood. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a woman, her movements slow and cautious. She was heavily pregnant, her face pale with worry. My heart tightened as I wiped my hands on a rag and walked over. "Evening, ma'am," I said, offering a smile to put her at ease. "What seems to be the problem?" She let out a shaky breath. "My car started smoking on the highway," she said, her voice trembling. "I was on my way to a doctor's appointment, and She stopped abruptly, placing a hand on her belly. "Don't worry," I said gently. "We'll get you back on the road in no time. Let me take a look." I popped the hood and winced. "Coolant leak." "It's nothing too serious," I muttered, mostly to myself. "I'll have it fixed in 20 minutes. The woman, Jennifer Stevenson, nodded, leaning against the car. I worked quickly, but as I tightened the last hose, I noticed her wince and clutch her stomach. "Mom, are you okay?" I asked, my concern rising. It's probably just Braxton Hicks, she said, though her voice was unconvincing. They've been coming and going for about an hour. I set my wrench down, my instincts from the maternity clinic kicking in. How far apart are they? Jennifer glanced at her watch. About 7 minutes, she admitted. My stomach dropped. 7 minutes was close. Too close. Ma'am, I said carefully, I don't think these are Braxton Hicks. This might be the real thing. Her eyes widened, fear flashing across her face. No, it can't be, she whispered. I'm not due for another 3 weeks. Babies don't always stick to schedules, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Let's get you inside to sit down. Just in case. She nodded reluctantly, letting me guide her to the bench in the waiting area. I handed her a bottle of water, crouching in front of her. Let's time the contractions, I said, pulling out my phone. As the minutes ticked by, I watched her breathing grow heavier. The contractions were getting closer together. 6 minutes, then 5. Ma'am, I said, keeping my voice steady, I think we need to get you to a clinic. Now. Jennifer's face went pale. I can't do this. I can't. You can, I interrupted. You're stronger than you think, and I'm not going to let anything happen to you or your baby. Tears streamed down her face as I grabbed the shop's van keys. As I helped her into the passenger seat, my mind raced. I didn't know how this night would end, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let her face it alone. As the van roared to life, she gripped my arm. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling. I gave her a small smile, trying to reassure her. Hang on, ma'am. We've got this. And with that, I drove into the night, unaware that this moment would change my life forever. The van's engine hummed as I weaved through the bustling evening traffic, my eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror where Jennifer sat in the backseat. The city outside seemed oblivious to the urgency in the van. Pedestrians ambled along the sidewalks, neon signs blinked lazily in shop windows, and streetlights cast a familiar glow on the chaos below. Inside, though, the air felt tight, electric with anxiety. Okay, Jennifer, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Deep breaths, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Watch me. I exaggerated the motion, inhaling and exhaling slowly. She nodded, her breathing ragged as she mirrored me. I'm trying, she gasped, clutching her belly. You're doing great, I reassured her. We're almost there. But then it happened. Jennifer let out a sharp, guttural cry, her hand gripping the seatbelt as another contraction racked her body. The baby's coming, she gasped. My stomach dropped. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not here, not now. I scanned the road, spotting an empty stretch illuminated by a flickering street lamp. I pulled the van to the side and cut the engine, turning to face her. Jennifer, listen to me, I said, forcing my hands to stay still even though they wanted to shake. Nurse Carla's voice echoed in my head. Stay calm. Your energy keeps them calm. Her wide, fearful eyes locked onto mine. I can't, she whispered. I can't do this. I don't know how. Yes, you can, I said, holding her gaze. You're stronger than you think. I'll be right here with you every step of the way. Her breathing slowed, her panic giving way to fragile trust. What do we do? I reached into my bag, my trusty, always prepared bag that still held remnants from my janitor days at the clinic. Sterile gloves, a towel, a roll of gauze. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I spread the blankets across the seat to make a safe space. Okay, I said, snapping on the gloves and settling beside her. When you feel the next contraction, I need you to push. I'll guide you through it. Jennifer nodded, her face pale but resolute. Moments later, another contraction hit, and she cried out, her body stiffening. You're doing great, I said, leaning in to check. I can see the baby's head. One more big push, Jennifer. You've got this. She gritted her teeth and pushed with everything she had. Time slowed, and then it happened. The unmistakable, miraculous sound of a newborn's first cry filled the van. "It's a boy," I said softly, holding the tiny, wriggling infant in my hands. Relief and awe washed over me as I quickly cleaned him with the towel and wrapped him snugly. I handed the baby to Jennifer, who burst into tears the moment she held her son. "He's perfect," she whispered, her voice trembling. She looked up at me, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you." I smiled, the tension in my chest finally easing. "You did all the hard work, Mom," I said, though my heart swelled with pride. Once the baby was safe in her arms, I climbed back into the driver's seat. The van felt lighter now, its urgency replaced with a quiet, fragile hope. Jennifer cradled her son in the back seat, her exhaustion overshadowed by the peace that came with knowing he was healthy and safe. When we reached the healthcare center, I barely had time to park before a team of nurses and midwives rushed out, alerted by my frantic call. They helped Jennifer onto a stretcher, their voices gentle but efficient as they cooed over the newborn. But Jennifer wouldn't let go of my hand. "He saved us," she told the staff, her voice steady even as tears streamed down her face. "This young man, he's our guardian angel." The nurses exchanged glances, their admiration clear. "Thank you for staying so calm," one of them said to me. I stepped back, leaning against the van as they wheeled Jennifer and her baby inside. My hands were trembling now, the adrenaline finally wearing off, but my chest felt lighter than it had in years. For a moment, I stood there, letting the night air cool my face. I thought about everything that had brought me here, the hours at the shop, the lessons from the maternity clinic, the sacrifices my family had made. In that moment, I didn't feel like a 19-year-old dropout or a kid just trying to make ends meet. I felt like someone who had made a difference. Jennifer lay in the hospital bed, her newborn son nestled in her arms. The sterile white walls of the room, which might have seemed cold on another day, now felt like a sanctuary. The chaos and fear of the past few hours were behind her, and she could finally exhale. The doctors had reassured her. Both she and her baby were perfectly healthy. Still, her mind kept circling back to one person. "He's a guardian angel," she told every nurse or doctor who stepped into the room. Her voice carried a tremble of awe and gratitude. "That young man didn't just help me. He saved us. He knew exactly what to do." The nurses, touched by her story, began whispering it among themselves. Soon, the entire clinic knew about the 19-year-old who had delivered a baby on the side of the road. Word spread beyond the clinic walls, and a local reporter reached out, eager to tell the remarkable tale of Abdul Jasper. The next day, Jennifer's family arrived at the hospital. Her husband, Robert Stevenson, strode into the room with a mix of urgency and relief, his usually composed demeanor replaced by raw emotion. His eyes locked onto Jennifer and the baby, and he rushed to her side, enveloping her in a gentle embrace. "I don't know how to thank the person who helped you," Robert said after a moment, his voice heavy with emotion. Jennifer smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "You'll meet him soon," she said, "and when you do, you'll understand how incredible he is." Moments later, Abdul walked into the room, invited by the nurses who had become as enamored with him as Jennifer was. He entered hesitantly, his hands stuffed into his pockets, his usual calm replaced with a shy uncertainty. He nodded politely at Robert and gave Jennifer a small smile. "Abdul," Jennifer called out warmly. "Come in. Don't be shy." Robert rose and walked over to Abdul, extending a hand. "You're the young man who saved my family," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't have the words to thank you." Abdul shook his hand, his own voice soft. "I'm just glad they're okay, sir," he said. Robert didn't let go of Abdul's hand. Instead, he pulled him into an embrace, tears streaming down his face. "You didn't just save their lives, you saved mine too. I don't know what I would have done if something had happened to them." Jennifer, watching from her bed, felt her own tears fall. She had never seen her reserved husband so openly emotional, and it only deepened her gratitude for Abdul. As the hours passed, Jennifer and Robert learned more about Abdul's life. He spoke humbly, explaining how he had dropped out of school to support his family after his father fell ill, and how he had picked up medical skills during his time as a janitor at a maternity clinic. Jennifer shook her head in disbelief. "You've done so much for someone your age," she said. "And when I needed help, you didn't hesitate." Robert, clearly moved, made a decision. "We owe you a debt we can never fully repay," he said. "But we want to help you reach your potential." The next day, Robert returned to the hospital with a letter. "It's a scholarship," he explained, handing it to Abdul. "To a vocational school where you can study mechanics and engineering. You have a gift, Abdul, and the world needs to see it." As if that weren't enough, the Stevensons also presented Abdul with a car from their personal collection. "You'll need this," Jennifer said with a smile. "For school, for work, for all the people you're going to help." Abdul stared at them, his voice trembling. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. Jennifer reached out, squeezing his hand. "Just keep being the amazing person you are," she said. "That's all we ask." News of Abdul's heroics spread like wildfire. Reporters flocked to the auto shop where he worked, hoping to interview the humble young man who had delivered a baby on the side of the road. Though he was initially reluctant, Abdul eventually agreed, hoping his story might inspire others. "I just did what anyone would do," he said during one interview. "She needed help, and I was there. I couldn't leave her in trouble." His humility struck a chord with viewers. Social media buzzed with hashtags like #AbdulHero and #GuardianAngel. People from all over the country reached out with messages of support, praising his bravery and selflessness. One viewer, deeply inspired, started a crowdfunding campaign to support Abdul's education and his family's financial struggles. Donations poured in, enough to cover not only his vocational school fees, but also medical bills for his father and other family expenses. Despite the sudden attention, Abdul remained grounded. "I'm grateful for the support," he said in a follow-up interview, "but the most important thing is that Jennifer and her baby are safe. That's what matters." Jennifer and Robert continued to sing Abdul's praises, sharing their story at every opportunity. Jennifer, especially, became an advocate for recognizing everyday heroes. "People like Abdul remind us that courage and kindness are alive in this world," she said during a local news segment. Abdul, in turn, found himself invited to speak at schools and community events. Though nervous at first, he embraced the chance to inspire others. "If there's one thing I've learned," he told a group of high school students, "it's that you don't have to have everything figured out to make a difference. Just do what you can with what you have." Abdul's life had transformed overnight, but his core remained the same: humble, hardworking, and deeply compassionate. For him, the greatest reward wasn't the scholarship, the car, or the recognition. It was the knowledge that he had made a difference when it mattered most. That, he believed, was worth more than anything in the world. Abdul Jasper's life transformed in ways he never thought possible. The scholarship from Robert Stevenson was more than a gift. It was a lifeline that allowed him to enroll at one of the most prestigious technical institutes in the region. Abdul stepped into the clean, modern halls of the institute on his first day with a mix of excitement and trepidation. He felt out of place, a kid from the gritty streets surrounded by polished students who seemed to belong. But as soon as he entered the workshop, the doubt melted away. The engines, tools, and blueprints felt like home, and Abdul's talent became undeniable from the start. "Jasper," his instructor said after watching him troubleshoot a complex system, "you're not just good, you're exceptional. It's like you can see the soul of the machine." Abdul laughed, scratching the back of his neck. "I've just been working with my hands for a while," he said modestly, though he felt a quiet pride. Despite his packed schedule of classes and projects, Abdul made time to return to the maternity clinic where his journey to heroism had begun. Walking through those familiar halls, he was no longer the teenager sweeping floors, but a young man whose story inspired everyone around him. Abdul. Nurse Carla called out one day, her face lighting up as she spotted him. "You're back. I missed this place," he said with a smile. The nurses often introduced him to expectant mothers, asking him to share his story. Abdul spoke with warmth and humility, recounting the night he delivered a baby in the back of a van. "I didn't have all the answers," he would say, his tone conversational, "but I knew I couldn't give up. Sometimes you just have to trust yourself and do what needs to be done." Jennifer Stevenson stayed in close contact with Abdul, their bond deepening over time. She often brought her son, Jasper, named in honor of Abdul's surname, to visit him at the institute. The first time they came, Abdul was tinkering with a hybrid engine. He wiped his hands on a rag as Jennifer and her little boy entered the workshop. "Jasper," Jennifer said, crouching beside her son. "This is Abdul." The toddler toddled over to Abdul, his tiny arms stretched out. "Up," he said confidently. Abdul laughed, scooping him up without hesitation. "Hey, buddy, you've grown so much." Jennifer watched the two of them with tears in her eyes. "Every time I look at him," she said softly, "I think about that night. You gave him his first moments in this world, Abdul. That's something I'll never forget." Abdul's expression grew serious. "You're the real hero, Jennifer. You went through all of that and stayed strong for him." Jennifer smiled but shook her head. "We were strong together," she replied. The story of Abdul Jasper and Jennifer Stevenson became more than a local legend. It became a symbol of hope and resilience. Women, especially grandmothers, saw in Abdul the values they cherished: kindness, courage, and a willingness to help a stranger in need. "I see my grandson in him," one elderly woman said during a community event where Abdul spoke. "That same big heart." Abdul, always humble, never saw himself as a hero. "I was just in the right place at the right time," he would say. But those who heard his story knew better. His bravery and selflessness didn't just save lives. They inspired a community to believe in the power of compassion. Years later, Abdul reached a milestone he had once thought impossible, graduating with top honors in automotive engineering. As he walked across the stage to receive his certification, he spotted familiar faces in the crowd: his mother, Jennifer, Robert, and little Jasper. Their cheers rang loud, but Abdul's heart swelled even more as he realized how far he had come. With the help of his community and admirers, Abdul opened his own auto repair shop. He called it Guardian Auto, a name that honored his role in Jennifer's life and the countless others he hoped to help in the future. The shop's grand opening was a celebration like no other. Neighbors, friends, and even former professors filled the small space, their faces glowing with pride. Jennifer stood at the front, holding Jasper's hand tightly. Abdul knelt beside the little boy, holding out a pair of oversized scissors. "You ready to cut the ribbon, buddy?" Jasper nodded eagerly, gripping the scissors with both hands. With Abdul's guidance, the ribbon fell, and the crowd erupted into cheers. Jennifer hugged Abdul tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You've changed so many lives," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Especially mine." Abdul's own eyes misted as he looked out at the crowd. His mother stood near the front, her smile radiant. Mr. Harris, his old boss, clapped loudly, his pride unmistakable. As the sun set on the celebration, Abdul stood outside his shop, watching the life he had built unfold around him. Children played nearby, their laughter filling the air like music. Jennifer and Robert sat on a bench, Jasper asleep in their arms. Abdul took a deep breath, a sense of peace settling over him. That single act of kindness on a chaotic night had set his life on a path he never could have imagined. And as he looked out at the faces of the people who had supported him, he knew one thing for certain: the best was yet to come. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. If Abdul's story moved you, endeavor to like, engage, subscribe, and share to your community. Have you ever shown kindness to anyone in a critical situation? How did it go? Do you care to share? It's the best way to help us continue sharing tales that matter. Together, we can spread the power of kindness and hope, one story at a time. See you in the next heartwarming tale.